Hi, I'm Corolla. On Instagram, I'm @FromCorolla. In this video, I'm going to show you how I painted and drew this abstract floral art piece using fountain pen ink as well as a Kakimori stainless steel nib. If you want to paint and draw along with me, take a look at the supplies that I've listed in the description below and join me. Otherwise, feel free to watch and enjoy the process. So for the full list of supplies that I'm going to be using, take a look in the description below because I always tend to miss one or two things that I'm using. So if you want to do this along with me, take a look there and gather the supplies that you need. I will say that I use the Everyday book from Galen leather, so it has Tomoe river paper. You are welcome to use watercolor paper or something similar, or you can use your planners or journals if you do use something that has Tomoe river paper. Also, feel free to use any inks that you have on hand and available to you. Usually I pick between 2 to 3, maybe 4 inks that I like or that I want to paint with. And I usually include a green because that's what I use for the leaves. And today in this video, I'm going to show you how to do line drawing using a Kakimori Nib. This is the stainless steel in a nib holder. This one is a mini contoured nib holder that I got from Rich at River City Pen Company. And it has a great feel to it when I'm holding it, and it feels very, very comfortable. And I will say the Kakimori nib takes a little bit of time to get used to. So if you do have one and you want to practice with it, this is perfect practice that you can do on your own time as well, anytime. And if you don't have a Kakimori nib, but you want to draw along with me, then I feel free to use any fine liner that you have on hand. My go-to is a Tomoe mono drawing pen, which I used in my last video. So feel free to use a fine liner if that's what you have on hand. I'm going to be using 3 inks today. 2 are brand new from Ferris Wheel Press. So I'm going to be using Tunes of Tinseltown and Age of Aurum, which are their latest inks. They are shimmer inks. I'm also going to be using an ink that I used last month in my last video, called Festival Grove, and it's a very pretty light green. So those are the 3 inks that I'm going to be using today. And just in case you're curious, this is also a new ink carriage that Ferris Wheel Press is releasing. It's a polished gold. It's just kind of nice to display your inks on. So anytime I get a new ink bottle, whether I buy it or I'm gifted, what I usually do is I add a little bit in a vial and I number it and keep a running list of inks that I have in vials. And I use these for painting or when I'm using a glass dip pen. It's great to just have the ink on hand without having to, open the bottle of ink and dip things into that. And this way, I sort of have it in front of me. And I'm a firm believer of if I have something on my desk or in plain view, I will be more likely to use it than something that's put away in a drawer or organized somewhere. So that's just me. It may not be you, but that's how I sort of handle inks that I get a hold of. So the great thing about having these ink in vials is that you can quickly take them out and use them, and just make sure that you shake up or gently sort of move your vial around just to get the shimmer back into the ink. So the 3rd ink that I'm using is called Festival Grove. It's a light green ink from Ferris Wheel Press. And so that's ready to go. So I'm going to start with the lighter shade. This is the Age of Aurum, and I think it's like a gold or yellow, dark yellow color with some gold shimmer in it. And basically what I do is I put some ink on the bristles, but not so much that it's dripping, because otherwise it'll just sort of be a big blob on your paper. So I put down the paintbrush and just kind of move the ink around a little bit on the paper just to get this general sort of flower petal shape. And then you can sort of layer another flower outline on the side and probably one on the bottom, sort of like this. And remember, it doesn't need to look like flowers right now. That's part of the process of line drawing, is that we are going to add the details after. So if you want to keep a reference of the inks that you're using, I usually include a little swatch at the bottom. So just put a little bit of ink down, and then we'll add the name of the ink to it. So I'm gonna go to my second color, which is Tunes of Tinseltown, and I think this one's sort of like a dark green color with some gold shimmer. And wow, that is very dark, sort of like an like evergreen. And with this, I kind of like to layer it a little bit on top. You can experiment with blending depending on the ink color if you want. And if your previous ink is still wet, then you can of course add a little bit of ink to that and it becomes wet on wet blending. And so I've just sort of added around it. And again, I'm going to do a little swatch just to remind myself later what that ink was. And then we'll move on to painting the leaves. So a new paintbrush, the light green Festival Grove shade or ink. And I usually just sort of add some leaves on the bottom or on the side. And you can see how I do these sort of broad strokes to mimic leaves. Those are some big ones on the bottom. And then I'll add some in the corner here. Maybe some on the side, like this. And that's it. I will add a little swatch here, and those are the three colors or the three inks that we painted with. So normally what I would do is wait for the ink to dry before I draw on top, but because I wanted to show you a different way of accelerating the ink drying, today I'm going to use simply a blotter paper. So if you're painting along with me and you don't have time to wait for the ink to dry and come back to it later, this is one way that you can sort of blot out the excess ink so that you can draw on top pretty much right away. So we're going to do it together. We're going to take our blotter paper, we're going to place it gently on top so as not to move the ink around too much, and just press on the blotter paper. Without letting the blotter paper move, we're just going to sort of iron out the paper, if that makes sense. And what it's going to do is it's going to absorb and pull up some of the ink that's just sitting on top of the paper. And what you'll find is that the other side of your blotter paper is going to pull up that ink. And so you may pull up some shimmer, which is why I actually like leaving ink to dry by itself, because then you get the full properties showing on the paper. But, we don't always have the time or, want to wait for it to dry. So this is an easy way of accelerating that drying. And you see that there's still some shimmer that you can see in the ink. So that's great. And it doesn't look too flat, which it could if, you pull up too much of that excess ink. But this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is draw on top. And again, it doesn't have to look like flowers and leaves for us to be able to draw the details on top. So the outline is just gonna give us a little bit of guidance to where we're gonna draw the leaves and the flowers. And this is abstract floral art, so it doesn't have to look exactly like what you would see in nature. So again, for the line drawing, I'm going to use this stainless steel Kakimori Nib, which is in a mini contoured holder from River City Pen Company. You can use any nib holder that you have, but I really like this because it has this soft, I think it's silicone, maybe plastic. Anyways, it has this soft grip in here that you put your nib inside, and that will, unlike some other pen holders that use this metal grip here, that will cause your nib to rust over time if you leave it in. This grip will not. So that's kind of a cool feature of this nib holder from River City Pen Company that I really like. So if you have a Kakimori nib, grab it, because we can draw together. If you don't, again, you can use a fine liner like I showed in my previous video, and it's good to go. So the ink that I'm going to use with my Kakimori nib is actually the Kakimori black pigment ink. If you have a pigment ink, feel free to use that. Remember, you're gonna wash your Kakimori nib right after you're done drawing with it, so you should be able to wash off any excess ink that gets caught in the grooves. Or if you have any black fountain pen ink that you would like to use, feel free to grab that. And that's what I'm going to use to draw the lines. So I dipped my Kakimori nib in. I don't want it to be dripping off the nib, but I want enough ink on there that I don't have to keep dipping into the bottle. So once you have some ink on your Kakimori nib, or if you have a fine liner available, I would start to draw just lines around your leaves that you have here, or anything that you have in the corner. So I sort of work my way down just so I don't smudge or go over lines that I already drew. And for the flowers, I'm going to simply draw or shade in the middle part of the flower, where I would think is a center. And then I work my way outward and around, just drawing these outlines of petal-like shapes. And then I work my way down, and I let my hand sort of just guide me where I think that those flowers would be. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't have to be perfect, and you have the ink here as outlines, which is very helpful. And I sort of just work my way through. Some petals will be facing outward towards you and curling towards the center of the flower, and you can sort of mimic that with lines that show a curling of the leaf. And some flowers are facing sideways, so you can just experiment and play with those lines. And the great thing about this nib is that, the Kakimori nib, is that you can angle the nib to get fine lines or thicker lines, and it just gives a little bit more interest, and as you can see, a little bit more shading power. So whereas with the fine liner, you sort of have that one line to play with, the great thing about the Kakimori nib is that you have different lines that you can use some shading in there if you prefer, and or you can just use thin lines by angling upward a little bit. This is where I'm going to write what the inks are. And so what I simply do is draw a square around the ink swatch, and then I write what the ink name is. So that's it. That's my abstract floral art piece, painting with fountain pen inks and doing some line drawing using a Kakimori stainless steel nib. If you did it along with me, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun. Feel free to share. I would love to see what you created. And if you just watched, thank you so much for watching. I'm Corolla on Instagram. I'm @FromCorolla. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.